My name is Eddie Fast, and I came to Whitehorse Baptist about a year ago, but Yukon I came about 16 months ago in late June 2015. So I came to the Yukon because I was in a marriage that was um, not positive. I got married in September 26, 2014, and for the 9 months that we were married before coming to Yukon was very tumultuous. It was a real struggle to get to the altar initially, but when we got there, we thought, oh, hey, this is going to solve our issues, but it didn't. It actually got much worse. And we had gone through a lot in Toronto while we were there. Our community disowned us. We didn't have support systems. Her best friend was in France. My best friend was in Victoria. Me and my wife were in Toronto, and we were living in a community, and it was pretty terrible community, unfortunately, because there were a lot of wolves in sheep clothing, a lot of people who kind of disowned us as well. We reached out for help for our marriage, for counseling, and that didn't work out. And our friends were on other sides of the world, and it was really difficult to work on our marriage and work on our own problems at the same time too. So we ended up just combating most of the time, and then both suffering from depression, and it was just a downhill spiral. It was awful. So I made the decision to actually move out to Yukon to separate from my wife, because I had a real struggle with the grass is always greener on the other side issue, and this was one of the downfalls of our marriage, but it ended up leading me to where I am today. So for a year, we actually split up, and we're deciding to call it quits. And I was living in the Yukon, living what I thought was exactly what I needed to do, which was get into adventures and go out in the backcountry and enjoy my life for me and try to live how I wanted to live my life and how I thought I should live my life. Little did I know there were small voices of God in my heart. Every time I would hear marriage or specific verses, specifically in Malachi, about marriage and return to the wife of your youth and things like that. And usually God speaks to me through scripture, so it really hit me hard. But I would try to stifle that, and I would push it to the back and say, you know what, forget it. This is the right decision. Yukon's the right decision for me. And I love these mountains. I love the people. This is where I'm going to be for life. So I went and reached out to some churches and tried to find a community somewhere that I can plug into and get a little bit of support. So I approached Pastor Jeremy, and we went for coffee, and I really wanted to pick his ear about divorce. And I was really worried that from my previous knowledge of what a Baptist church would be, divorce is not a really good thing. So I was worried that I wouldn't be accepted in the community, but it was the opposite. He was very supportive of me and really encouraging during the time that I needed it to be. So I plugged into the community, and they welcomed me with open arms, and it was really encouraging time to be alone during this time and the struggles and all the things that I was dealing with, the separation and whether or not we were going to go through the divorce. And this is all going on in my mind for about a year. And so God turned up very unexpectedly. These quiet speakings to my heart were a little bit louder. So in July, Allison messaged me, and this was out of the blue because we didn't talk for a month and a half. And she said, hey, Eddie, I'm coming up to hike in Tombstone with a mutual friend of ours who lives up here. And I thought, okay, well, that might be awkward, but we'll see. So I ended up picking her up from the airport, and we went on a day hike, and that was tumultuous. But after that, she went on her way, and a week later, she went hiking in Tombstone, and I had my first guided trip with clients to Tombstone as well, and we knew that we would meet each other. It was timing just wasn't right. She's helicoptering out, and there was no way we were going to see each other. The funny thing, and this is hilarious, in the information center at Tombstone, while I was there with my clients, in walks her friend. And I knew she was right behind. And I went, oh my goodness, there she is. This is hilarious. So she walks in and she sees me and I saw her, and we came together and we talked, and it was really nice. And it was at that time she had asked me to come visit her for a week of hiking. She had opened up a time and schedule that she didn't know why she did. She just felt compelled to open up a week in September. She could always add those shifts later. But then she realized that, well, that's what we should do. In my head, I was thinking, well, I'm probably not going to want to do this because this is a chapter that I'd wanted to close. And I'd actually told her that. I wanted to close the chapter, put this part of my life behind me, and actually move forward and live my life how I want to live my life, how I'm compelled to live my life, I thought. So she went on her way and I went on my way, and I did my tours. And what she also told me was that God had been speaking to her in really loud and profound ways, in ways she couldn't explain. And at first she thought was coincidence. The whole message was that she should reconcile with me. And at that point, she had not forgiven me for what I had done in the relationship. And she said, no way, this won't happen. It's just a coincidence. And so God, in his funny and infinite wisdom, came at her from different angles and kept coming at different angles and hitting her with this thought of reconciliation, which brought her to a point where she couldn't ignore it. And as soon as she said yes to it, he gave her peace in the decision, to the point where she actually forgave me for what I did. And this is a huge moment. This really is huge. And also to the point where she felt that she wanted to get back into a relationship with me, which is 180 degrees from where she was, even when we were in Tombstone. So she told me this, and I thought, okay, if God is really talking to her, then he has to talk to me. He can't talk to one person and that person forces the other person. This is not how God works. So I had made up my mind, okay, I'm going to be in a tent for a month with clients. I'll be in my own tent and I'll be alone, so I'll have time to talk to God, which is funny because sometimes God works in weird ways and he says, well, Eddie, you're in the place I want you to be, alone in a tent. Great time to talk to me. So for a month straight, I talked to him, and I'd asked him every night if this was the right decision. If he wanted me to reconcile with Allison, then he's got to hit me over the head with it. He's got to make it absolutely clear that this is the way that I need to go. Otherwise, I don't want any more waffling. I didn't want to, have this on the fence struggle that was going on the year before when we were married. So slowly through that time, he worked on me. And in between my guided trips, I came back and asked my boss to have the date off. I said, I can always fill the spot. I can always ask for the shifts in that time if it comes to the point. And even thinking, even if we do go on the hike for a week in Vancouver, then I can always just sign the papers at the end and we can call it quits. If it doesn't work out, then I have my exit strategy. So I managed to get the time off of work, which was great. And the whole point was to go on a hike, to do some backcountry hiking with Allison, the way we really didn't get a chance to do. And we both love the outdoors, so much so that Toronto was stifling. And it was awful because we didn't have access to nature as much as we wanted to. And we were trapped in the concrete jungle of desperation, really. So a week before that, before the trip, I talked to Jeremy, and we went for coffee like usual, and I told him about that. And it wasn't until 3 days before the trip, and I had asked Jeremy, it was like, ooh, I had questions still, and there were still lingering questions about divorce, about marriage, and he told me out of left field his opinion on the matter, that he's been praying that we would get back together this whole time, and I had no idea, which tells you the grace that he had for me. He told me in a text 3 days before the trip that him and Nicole were praying for me, and we're praying for Allison to get back together, for our marriage, that we would actually thrive. And it floored me. when I read the text, it hit me so deep that he had actually thought that, because I had no hint that he was in that camp at all for the whole entire year that we were going for coffee every month. And it was encouraging to hear, but it also hit me to my core. At the same time, little did I know, he had contacted Allison, and he had sent her a message saying, "You don't know me, but I'm the pastor. I'm Eddie's pastor, and we've been praying for your reconciliation with your husband." And on her side, it was a real monumental thing. It was huge that another person would have wanted this to come together, who had no idea who we are, who didn't know our struggles from the past as much, who didn't know her and what she struggled with, but yeah, it was really, really, really powerful. And so she felt encouraged, and she told me later, but so she felt encouraged, and it helped me to get to the point where I was willing to go on this trip, on this hike with her in the backcountry. And so we did. And so I flew down and we went on the hike. And it was easy. And we've been on hikes before where it wasn't. But this was easy. We had little disagreements, but we both had a surprising amount of grace for each other and patience. And I think that is what that year did for us. We both spent a year in the mountains. When I left for Yukon, shortly after, Allison moved to Langley and got a job in Langley Tower. So she was able to live in Vancouver and hike and actually get into God's creation and breathe and actually help her. So we were different people. It was a year older, we were a year older, and we gave a lot of grace for each other. And it really showed in that trip. And we worked well together, and it was like we were dating. It was a throwback to when we actually first started dating, and we first started to get to know each other, and it was really great. And so midway through the trip, I started, and slowly it started becoming more and more peaceful in my heart, and which was very encouraging. Funny enough, at the trailhead, we were both sitting in the vehicle, and it finally, and I can't believe it took me this long to figure this out, but our marriage on earth is a direct relation to Christ's relationship with us, and it's the Ephesians 5 thing. And I've looked at Ephesians 5 so many times going, I'm going to be a good husband, and it was backwards. My focus was on being a better husband versus connecting my relationship with Christ. So we are supposed to love our wife like Christ loved the church. Well, he gave himself up and died for us. And for so long, I was focused on our chemistry, our attraction, our interests, and our earthly connection together with my wife. And I didn't neglect, but I put on the side burner. I guess I put on the rung below my relationship with Christ, which should be the first. And so we're like, well, we don't have chemistry, or we're not meant to be together. But if we are focused on Christ, then that sorts itself out. The vertical helps the horizontal, absolutely, as it were. But to be a representation of Christ with all of humanity, with his church, is one of the most beautiful things that I can think about. And one of the most beautiful reasons that I can have to further my relationship with my wife, to get back with her, to reconcile as Christ reconciled us to God. So that made me more emotional than anything. And it started our hike. That was how it started. And it just grew from there. And so as I was focusing on God, and as we were praying, and as we were putting God in the center of our relationship, we got closer together. And I guess the analogy would be coming in, on either sides of a pyramid. The pyramid ends at God. And we're both on either side at the base, far from each other, but we get closer and closer and closer. And so my goal for our relationship is that we will continually look to God and not look to our our feeble humanity, because the flesh is calling, the enemy is attacking, and all the other things that are telling us not to get back together. So our decision after this hike was to reconcile, and we didn't consider any logistics in this matter, which is a whole nother ball of wax. It's I don't know how to describe it other than, it's a lot of things that needed to be taken care of. But we decided to reconcile, despite me living in the Yukon with all the opportunities that are already set in place, and her living in Vancouver with her 2-year contract and her community that has surrounded her and helped her during this time, which is great because it takes us out of the equation and it puts God first. So we decided to reconcile, to get back together, and slowly it's been trying to figure out how that's going to look. As of 2 weeks ago, I made the decision, despite the opportunities that I have up there and the lovely community that I found in Whitehorse Baptist. I'm going to be moving down to Vancouver to work it out with her. In fact, this morning, after I record this, I'm going to be driving out with all my earthly possessions down the Stuart Cassiar, and in 4 days, I'm going to reconnect with my wife. So, I want to say thank you to my community group, and for those who I've connected with on a deeper level, for helping me and support me and give me a good example to keep me on track, I guess. It's been a really good journey, but I really will miss my community up here. As for advice I give to any married couples who are out there, I would say don't give up. Even if you feel that your heart is calling you somewhere else, believe God with the gifts that He is giving you. Believe that He gives you good things, and that those things are worth nurturing. Because there's a lot of shiny things in the world. There's a lot of things that are good and might be good, but He didn't give you those things. He gave you good things. Like the father who doesn't give his son a scorpion when he asks him for a fish. God gives us immeasurably better gifts than that because He's God and He knows what we need. He gave Allison to me, and I didn't nurture her the way that I should have. I almost buried it in the ground and then said, well, I'm fearful of God, so I won't touch this and do my own thing. Like the parable of the talents. I'm rambling now, but that's one of the big lessons that I definitely learned from this is, receive what God has given you with a glad heart and with gratefulness, because He gives good things.